around that same time, back in the 80s, girls couldn't do stuff. My dad just used to really engage with everyone he met, and I don't think I realised, but I absorbed that way of life. Apparently, when I was 4 years old, I said I was going to be a pilot. I went and accepted my place on the Masters straight away because I knew my BA application was going to get pulled. I started doing my private pilot's licence off the back of the BBC stuff, just a little bit. I went to Spain and I did that, and I had a very interesting Spanish instructor. Hadn't made it as a pilot himself, but was an instructor or a commercial pilot.
Ooh.
And he did not want me, he didn't want me to progress, and he was making my life misery. I am obsessed with reaching net zero and how the aviation industry is going to do it. You can't stop flying. We just need to do it in a different way. The last thing you can do is walk to the government and say, God, there's no maternity pay. There's no maternity pay in our industry. So when they were negotiating long-term sick packages and things like that, they didn't go, oh, and by the way, we need maternity for female pilots, because they just didn't even think about it. I had a mortgage to pay, kids to look after, and I went from a corporate salary to nothing.
What is it like being a pilot?
So,
and welcome to another episode of Everyday Leadership. Today I have Sarah Brodie in the house. Sarah is someone who, in fact, a mutual friend of ours, Denise, a friend of the podcast and a friend outside of this, reached out. She's like, you need to speak to Sarah. She is an amazing pilot. She's changing things in the airline industry. You need to speak to her. When did you say that I need to do something? I listen, So I reached out to Sarah. We got on there. We arranged to meet up and set this conversation up. But like I said, Sarah is family, aviation, travel community, environmentalist. She is all those things and many, many more, which we're going to explore in today's conversation. So Sarah, thank you very much for saying yes and coming on. How are you doing?
yeah, thank you for having me. And the same for me with Denise, because she asked me, I said yes.
So Denise knows. She knows the conversations that need to be had and need to be tapped into.
Yeah.
And honestly, when I was like doing a bit of this research for this episode, I was fascinated by your journey. One, you're a pilot. You've been doing this for a very long time. But I guess if I was to go way back to even before you stepped into that world, I'm curious actually, what were you thinking of as a younger you? 11-year-old Sarah, what were you like then?
So my daughter's 11. I'm trying to revisit that time, and I can't remember too much about it. I was very sporty. So for me, tennis and was my big thing. I loved it. And my school played hockey. And I had to play hockey because that was the option. But I'd come from primary school that was co-ed, and I used to play football, and the boys used to play netball. So at 11 was quite an interesting time for me because I'd been at a C of E primary school, and then I went to all girls Catholic school, and around that same time, which was back in the 80s, girls couldn't do stuff. So being a professional football player was not an option. And I had a massive strop on about it. I really found that, quite an injustice. And, when I went to Catholic school, it was like, what do you mean there's a different way? I can't come and have communion, and because I'm not confirmed in the Catholic Church, and it really challenged me. But in the background, I was a very happy person because I was always out on my bike, and I had great parents. And my dad's parents lived in Australia. We used to do big long journeys down to Australia every other year, which my brother and I were very aware was really privileged in those days. People didn't travel. We had this ability. My dad used to fly as well, so we had this ability to fly. So as an 11-year-old, I did things like sit in the flight deck to watch a jumbo landing into short runway in Perth. I went into the old Hong Kong airport, and I used to hang out with the cabin crew in flight, look at the doors they were doing and their role, and it was very international. So my dad had this real wanderlust and great sense of fun, and we used to, so one time we just got, I think it was about 12 hours in Singapore, and in that time, we'd visited a temple, we'd met some people, we'd been out for a meal and really absorbed the place, and then kind of went on to the next place. And my dad just used to really engage with everyone he met, and I don't think I realised, but I absorbed that way of life. And I didn't, apparently when I was 4 years old, I said I was going to be a pilot. And then, I went to school and different things happened and things. But whatever I tried, my eyes were in the sky, and not much really beats flying. So in the end, I came back to it. But initially, on taking my A-levels, I was looking at joining the RAF. But my mum and my grandma, and I grew up in Reading, which was the home of the UK Met Office for weather forecasting. But my mum and my grandma were just always in the garden telling me about the weather, what flowers had popped up. And I had this other, I loved the way we were always, Michael Fish had misjudged the hurricane and things. And, so I had that in my mind. And I basically went to university thinking I was going to join the RAF. I took astrophysics in London, and I had a summer job in my last year of university. I was packing pens in the factory with a friend. It was quite fun. And on a Thursday, we were going through the job pages as to what we could do. And I was reading an advert, and it said scientific background, maths or physics, good communicator, strong interest in weather systems, great presenting skills. And then I looked at the bottom, and on one side it said the BBC, and on the other side it said the Met Office. And then at the top it said broadcast meteorologist, and I went, weather girl. And two ladies that I was working with, like local ladies, they just went, we can see you doing that. We can see you doing that, which actually everybody says to me. It's quite funny. And I was like, yeah, I can see me doing that. So I put an application in, and I got through to a screen test, which was amazing. I had a look at what kind of courses they did, and just as a real backup, I applied to do a master's postgrad. So it was climate modelling. And no, I didn't really think about it. I put the application in, did really well, got offered sponsorship. But at the same time, I was ringing the BBC up every day, their careers department or their job department, and I was going, have you got any jobs yet? Have you got anything advertised today? Anything advertised today? And I think they were literally like, oh, it's her again. And one day the lady said, well, we've got a job in subtitling. we need a I can't remember what the title was now, a research assistant. So it's a bit like if you were in the studio, you'd be like a runner. So it's real low level entry, but amazing to get in. So I said, oh, great, okay, send me the advert and I'll stick an application in. And I read it and it looked really interesting, and applied, got in, and then sort of, keeping an eye on British Airways, keeping an eye on the Masters, keeping an eye on the weather forecasting, and I had a blast. That year was amazing. It's the good old days of the Beeb, fantastic organisation. I owe so much to it. I took every opportunity I could get. So at lunchtimes, I used to go and find a talk, an internal talk you could do. I would go and try and visit the weather studio and try and have a go. Met all the team in there. I used to go and watch kind of live recordings of things whenever I could, as just like an audience member. So I saw Have I Got News for You being made. I used to go and watch the news. It was actually in the same studio as Moira Stewart, who's just amazing. Loved her. She was just so cool. And I was just absorbing all of this. And they also had a sort of social club, which included a flying club. And because I was junior, they were very supportive of under 24s in the company. So they used to help their kind of young recruits. And one of the things they did was give me my first 5 hours of flying.
Wow.
Book. I know. Yeah.
That really was the good old days.
Exactly, Sophie, exactly. So, it was fantastic. So it was a Slingsby Firefly, which is aerobatic, and there was a guy called John and a guy called Eric, and Eric had won a BAFTA for his coverage of broadcasting operas, and John had worked with him because he used to be in the RAF. When he left the RAF, he'd become an architect and he'd got into doing set designs. So they used to go to live events and check all the lighting and the microphones and where it would fit. And they were fascinating guys. But for the club, they used to go off and do aerobatics.
You talk about your experience and being at the BBC, also applying for British Airways and all of that kind of stuff. I'm curious, because I know now, I think it's there's a 5% of women are pilots. There's 1,500. If I was to go back to when you're talking about in that time, I'm sure that number was probably under 100, if that. So did any of that ever factor into your mind around, this is an industry where there are not a lot of women in, and do I really want to go there? Or were you very much still no, I want to be a pilot and therefore I'm going to do it regardless?
I was aware of that. I think one time in all my travels when I was a kid, a lady pilot came over the tannoy. I didn't even really notice it. My parents were like, well, especially my dad was like, it's a lady pilot, it's a lady pilot, it's a woman pilot, it's a woman. And I was just like, oh, whatever. So what's so special about that? And I had this real, my brother used to call me Scrappy Doo growing up because, any kind of little injustice and I'd want to set it right, I was still like it. And I just did, honestly, it really annoyed me that I couldn't play football at senior school. It just really, really annoyed me. And I think I just felt the same way about the flying. But it's interesting because my mum used to work, but flexibly, which wasn't labelled as that. She did press the flower pictures and used to go to Chelsea Flower Show and different places. But there was a sense that she was always home. My dad used to travel, so I saw my dad was having fun, but he was the breadwinner. and we had mum at home, and I was always very grateful for that because I hated my dad going away. I remember that really strong. I'm so close to my dad. So that, again, somewhere in that patriarch went into my head. And I don't know, but, you know, some health conditions in my early 20s, and I wasn't sure I'd have children. I didn't think I was going to have children. So that whole planning ahead that a lot of girls do, sensibly do, I should say, you know, they think I'm not going to go. How am I going to go away for 5 days at a time and work funny hours when I've got children at home? So I never went through that thought process because I just thought, well, I can't have them. So, but I was also knocked off course because in that year when I was at the BBC, and I was at Television Centre when it happened, and we just had like TVs, you know, left, right, and centre. And September the 11th happened, and that was another real life changer because, you know, I had close friends in New York. I'd spent a lot of time out there, and to see that happen, and oddly, it didn't. I knew when I just even seeing it, just that was it. The industry done for a while. I went and accepted my place on the Masters straight away because I knew my BA application was going to get pulled, and that's exactly what happened. And it just really changed things. So again, just the flying was put aside. I went off to do the weather forecasting, and I was put on an RAF base, which was fantastic. And I didn't really, you know, again, it was just all boys, all guys, except for one or two girls who were doing the fast jet training. And I wanted to get stuck in, and it kind of rekindled all my, I want to be an RAF pilot, not even a commercial pilot. Just again, that was an absolutely fantastic experience. Like fast-paced, really high standards, fast jets. It was just so cool. One of the instructors was like, "Come on, come and join us. Go and do your officer training and for the weather, and then we'll cream you off to come onto the flying path." And I was like, that would be great. And then my mum had said something to me before uni about that I'm a peacemaker and I wouldn't want to, get involved in wars, which is true. And she didn't want me to get involved with wars. And I was going, I could do search and rescue. It'd be okay. But I think with that in mind, I just thought, no, I'll go commercial. And by that time, sort of 2003, a couple of my friends had done their air transport licence and then got a job, and the industry was picking up a little bit. And I thought, oh, okay, now's the time. So, again, hadn't really thought about it with all the boys. I just thought, it just wouldn't affect me. It didn't matter. Girls can do anything. I'll just do it. And at that stage, I hadn't suffered any institutional misogyny, any bias. Everything was really good. Not that I was aware of anyway. I didn't think anything of it. And I started doing my private pilot's license off the back of the BBC stuff, just a little bit. And a couple of people from the Flying Club had gone and got their jobs in an airline, and the flight school that they went to in Spain, they highly recommended it. So I'd already got my ground school exams and I had my private pilot's license. I didn't do a full pilot's course, like where you start, they call it 0 to hero. So you start with absolutely no flying experience at all, and then you end up with an air transport license about 14 months later. So I joined kind of 6 months through, but I went to Spain and I did that, and I had a very interesting Spanish instructor who hadn't made it as a pilot himself, but was an instructor or a commercial pilot.
Ooh.
And he did not want me to progress. He didn't want me to progress, and he was making my life misery. It was, pretty intense, and, had up and down experiences of that ever since. It's been interesting. But on the whole, really great people, really great men who, make the world a better place. Stay for the 20%. 10-20%.
One of the things that you just talked about in that journey, and if I think about that, you becoming a pilot, you finally getting your license and navigating. You, from what I've read, is someone who's always been very much a campaigner and an advocate. So even though your mum said you're a peacemaker, you don't want to go to war, you still fight for things on the ground. Because one of the things I remember reading about you was around the campaign where you got 2 amazing kids. And one of the things that you campaigned about was the difference between maternity pay and how it wasn't great for women in comparison, because you had to take 2 years off. And I was thinking about it, I was like, how was that process? Because you spend a lot of time training and then you have to take 2 years unpaid at different times, but that's literally what you need to do, which is like I said, if you don't fly, you don't get paid. Did you feel like you had to speak out, or was it just based on circumstances around you? You're like, this is just unfair, and it was down to your values where you felt you had to speak out?
It was down to my values that made me feel I had to speak out. And the ladies who flew ahead of me, who, were so I flew with so some of the first female commercial pilots. I mean, it was 3 years into my career before I flew with another woman as a captain. So I was their first officer. So it was 100% men that I was flying with over that time. But it was an odd dynamic because the cabin crew were usually female heavy. So when you're away on a trip, it was lots of women, but they weren't, in my role. So it was like kind of basically an older guy, me, and then all the cabin crew on trips. When I was blessed. I had, I reconfirmed my faith when I had my son, because, for me, he was a miracle. He still is my miracle. It was tough because my parents are amazing, because they step in for childcare and things when always celebrate the grandparents. But I think you haven't got capacity to fight at the time, and nor should you have to. You're working, you've got, away from home, you've got babies at home. It splits you. There's a dishonesty if you think that you can just pick up work flying aircraft like a month later, from having your kids. You're not. There's no kind of getting around that. It's a physical job, even though you're perceived to be sat down. There's pressure changes, your early starts, your clock works all out, jet lag, time changes. And the last thing you can do is walk into the office or, an industrial, to the government and say, God, there's no maternity pay. There's no maternity pay in our industry. But because the men who sort of structured things, and it's quite RAF structure that's led into the kind of commercial industry. Not for any reason, they just hadn't thought about it. So when they were negotiating long-term sick packages and things like that, they didn't go, oh, and by the way, we need maternity for the female pilots, because they just didn't even think about it. When I'd gone part-time, 50%, the kids were both at school, and I had a daughter, my daughter was born, and, very few girls go into the office and do a management role or take a captaincy or, go senior. They don't move into the leadership roles because they're managing enough. And I just thought, well, even if I just do it for a year and pass the baton on to the next person, we need to stick up for it. But I actually joined in a campaign that was led by other pilot mothers, and they sort of joined forces, and I did my bit, and then I scanned off of it. But it was a successful year, and then they really achieved some changes. It's not perfect, but they moved the dial a little, made it slightly better. But I'd got onto a professional salary. I'd invested in my training, and I had a mortgage to pay, kids to look after, and I went from a corporate salary to nothing. Well, a token statutory amount, which wouldn't even pay, a little bit of my mortgage. So it was difficult. It was very difficult.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? Hey, you think about the negotiations they had at the start, because if it's an industry predominantly by men, that's not their frame of mind. That's not their context. That's not what's front of mind for them. So therefore, they're not really thinking about it. And that's why even when you talk about creating inclusive spaces, you need to have that mix of people in the room who can actually advocate for the points that are everyone's way of living and operating, rather than just what's prevalent for them. And I think it's always great to be able to hear stories like this, where it's like, well, I didn't necessarily want to do it, but I thought I had to do it because I'm tired. I don't necessarily want to be campaigning or advocating, but if you don't, then who? And you know what it's been like. You've gone through that journey, which, and I guess one of the things I know you're very, very passionate about is being able to make changes for other people coming up behind you. Things that you talked about, which I'm curious about actually. What is it like being a pilot? What are the effects it has? Because naturally you think about it, it's like, oh, pilots get in a plane, they fly a plane, they have a good time wherever they are, they come back home. That's all it is. You don't necessarily think about the mental, the emotional, the physical toll that you go through, even the training that you have to go through to get there and continuously stay at that level. And especially for someone like you who has been a first officer, now not just your captain as well. So there's a level that you've gone to which not necessarily everyone gets to. You're the best person to speak to something like that. What's it like being an actual part of a plane?
So fantastic. It's fantastic, but it is not all glamour. And who wants to focus on adversity and the downsides? Because I just want to tell you what an amazing view I had on Sunday, and it was fantastic. And I think you do just. So my dad always said it's your attitude in flying. You have to have the right attitude with your nose on the horizon, literally, for when you want to climb, descend, or cruise, and you need the right attitude in your head. So it's not always easy, because you might have a really early start, and then you might have all sorts of issues when you get to the airport. There could be a delay, which means you're waiting. You might have different weather conditions to deal with. So you're setting the plane up in a different way. But I think a lot of people don't realise that you never fly with the same person twice. So I might not have ever met any of my cabin crew or any of my first officers before, and then you just get thrown into these situations. 1 week you might be on an early pattern, another week you might be on a late pattern. You could go from earlies to lates in the same week, and we don't get our roster for maybe 2 to 4 weeks potentially, sometimes before. Sometimes we're on standby, and it can be tough on people around you, tough on you. I've missed numerous school plays, sports matches. In fact, my daughter was really crying last night because I've gone the whole season with us both agreeing what I would turn up for and not turn up for, but neither of us translated her Wednesday matches into the fact that I wouldn't have done one all season. And so we both had a moment. She just kind of was a bit tired last night. She went, "You didn't come into any of my cricket matches." And I went, "Oh, no, but I'm sure, as we went along, we just didn't realise the season's now over." I've personally been very lucky with Christmas, because with my part-time and, before I had children, I got a lot of Christmases out of the way. But that's due to change, not this year, next year, and I'll be on the roster. You miss stuff. You just miss stuff. I've missed funerals, weddings, first things for the kids, teeth falling out, when they're supposed to. That kind of stuff, So, but I've had, I had time off over COVID, and the kids got used to me being around, and then it was a kind of looming date that I was going back on roster, and my daughter wasn't very happy about me going away, and I remember the same feeling from when I was a kid, and I just said, let's have a think about what flying planes means and what it provides for us, and all the benefits that they've had, because they obviously come on holiday. I've taken them on trips as well, and I just said to her, when you're older and you become a mummy, I want you to be able to go away, still have your career. You don't, you need that. And I know you miss me, but you're going to be okay, and you've got brother still here, grandparents still here. So you've got your friends at school, and you'll be fine. They'll be back within a nanosecond. But every so often, just have to kind of have those, reaffirm those kind of things. And I have taken the decision as well just to stay short haul. I mainly do day trips. When they've both gone to university, I'm going to have a long haul swan song.
What's the difference apart from the time that it takes short haul, long haul? But is there any other difference in terms of for you as a pilot when you make those decisions as well?
I've never flown a Boeing, so I really want to do that. But there's some like in the A350, it's really cool. So, which is still the Airbus, and I could I'd quite like to see the best version of the plane I fly. Well, you have to be careful who I'm upsetting saying that, but I think these 350 is fantastic, Then there's the 380 and it's like 4 engines, and I'm like, oh, I'll probably never get a chance to do that game. But then, so yeah, it's hard. I think about all of it. Wow. Some people literally, like a friend of mine's wife is Japanese, and I think, certain fleet that goes to Japan more often than other fleets. So he's going to bid for that just purely so that they can get to Japan more. Crazy decisions that you guys would never think about.
Yeah, that's never. And I guess if we listen to your talk, I can see how, I guess like an athlete or a sports driver or even an artist, whatever it is you do, even in your normal field, you always want to, I guess, take on challenges. So whether that's like the latest plane, the size of the engine, all the different bits and pieces are things that I guess are exciting for you as pilots, because it's you in your zone. It's you doing your role. It's you doing what you enjoy doing, but also the challenges that come with that, which help you grow. But you can be like, oh yeah, I did that. It's like I drove that classic car. It's something along those lines where it feels good to be able to say that you've done as well.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, before I retire, I want to fly across the Atlantic. So I want to land into JFK. So before I retire, last summer I was really lucky because I got to backseat into JFK on it was still a work trip, but I wasn't actually flying, so that was really good. But you saying that about achieving the next thing, so I am obsessed with reaching net zero and how the aviation industry is going to do it. It's become my new football manager. I think about it all the time. It's really sad. And I look at, just think about what could I be flying in 10 years' time? Or, for me, it's the type of fuel we use. That's my personal obsession. So we call it SAF, which is Sustainable Aviation Fuels, but some people are now saying we should just call it alternative fuels, because it's very difficult to achieve 100% non-carbon fuel. But, moving away from fossil fuels, can you imagine it? Mm. But we still keep the industry going. I mean, that's a task.
Do you ever get that conflict or someone might call you, like, you say you're an environmentalist, but yet you're flying planes and hurting the environment? How did those two worlds kind of come together?
So, I go through ups and downs about it. I always have. So when I left the Met Office, so at Reading University, it's very leading in climate, and I had people in the Met Office at the Hadley Centre, and I used to work with them a little bit for communications. And people didn't like it that I was going to go flying. It was frowned upon, and that was a while back. But at the same time, it's not just the flying. I look at space. We need to progress. I really believe in that. So there's a balance. There's always a balance to be had. And it's very easy for one person to point a finger at another. But we are all hypocritical at some point. So that we've got a transition plan, or the industry's got a transition plan that allows us to continue making, in my opinion, being able to fly around the world makes the world a better place. I have no doubt about it. My experiences growing up where I was able to just visit different people, trade, it's amazing. It's almost made the world feel small. It isn't, but that you can't let that go. So it's interesting because it's tapped into that whole campaigning side of me. It's like we got stop flying. We just need to do it in a different way. But, where is the balance between bringing that new technology in and against, not flying at all? So what do? Do we just stop flying until the technology's there? The aviation industry at the moment is only 3% of the world's emissions, but when the other sectors start decarbonising, we can't decarbonise. So we know in the future, if we don't find alternatives, then we'll become, the 90% emissions of the world. So it's buying into the, we were talking earlier about having that faith that good prevails and that we'll get there. I mean, we've had amazing leaps in technology. It used to be about speed, and now it's about no emissions. That's where the tech's going. So in my day-to-day job, I was saying I try and make the plane, and we've got procedures in place. My colleague of mine's been working on it for years to make us like ultra efficient in what we do, and there is not a drop wasted in my operation. I'm trying to make my plane a glider. And we've got new planes compared to when I first started flying. It's like so much more improved and more efficient. You can fly on air almost compared to what I was flying 20 years ago.
Yeah, I think that is also good to be able to hear the progress. But even those stats, I guess, I never had that stat before. A lot of times you just tend to hear, I guess it's easy to be able to point at things like the airline industry as that's one of the main sources. Like, actually, it was only 3%. What's all the other 97% things that we are involved with, or the government's involved with, whatever that looks like, that it's also important to focus on. So it's not just one or the other, it's that both. And I guess having people who are conscious about it and aware of it and wanting to make that change and bring that change is super important, because you need to be in the industry to understand it and bring about that change, as opposed to people who are outside just kind of throwing stones. Yeah. And you talk about, like, I know you went into management last year. How has that been for you, being in the ground, which I'm sure feels like a complete different world in a manager role as opposed to being a captain of a plane?
Yeah. They didn't know what hit them. Because there's no filter. I have no filter. I just see it. It's got to be done, and then it's done. When you're flying a plane, you can't. It's a very procedural, fact-checking, methodical decision-making process. Mm-hmm. So you're very, very confident in what you're doing, very confident, and you've looked at all the options, and on a factual, mathematical, set of information, you'll make a decision off of that, and you can test your decision making. And there's nobody in my team on the plane who doesn't want to achieve the same goal as me, which is a safe landing at the other end with happy passengers. So you don't have to overthink it. That's it. That's it. So you think there's no need to overcomplicate it, but life isn't like that. Life isn't like it. So there's people, when you like just look at something like scheduling, there's thousands of people working in the UK, like tens of thousands of people running around the aviation network, and they will bring their humanity to it, the good and the bad. So you'll have people go sick, and then it will make something late, and then a plane will be late, and it's not quite as easy as I see it, but I'd like it to bring a little bit of, my operation into the company or the industry.
Is there is there a conflict between what I can call pilots, captains, those who are on that side of things, and then management or middle management, however you want to see things? Is there us and them? Because I definitely see it in my world, operating in that we're over here, we're over there, and there's always that divide when you have two people who are aligned to do the same thing but do it in different ways.
I mean, that's another thing that I saw from my management. It's how the European Union with their emissions trading scheme, and how that really does have an impact. It's a real headache for companies and the industry. So you have to think about it, and the taxes you pay, and how the whole structure is there. Then so the pilots, you don't necessarily see that side of things, and don't really see how things have set up. But when you're working and you're in a really pressured situation like you are as pilots, you want to know that everyone's on your side. So if you go to an airport, there's fire services, everyone's current in their first aid skills, everybody's expecting you're booked in at the right place. And I think if ever there's any disruption, or if a company's not got all their resources in the right place at the right time, it's really easy as a pilot to just be very frustrated by it, because we're at we're the first line of defence otherwise. Sorry, we're sat here for an hour waiting for our slot because there's air traffic strikes somewhere else in the world. So it's a huge machine.
I guess it's in fact, I was just thinking about recently when I was stuck waiting for about 2 hours, and I was just so frustrated. I think at that point in time, you kind of just lose focus of all the different multiple layers that are involved in the whole process. And just want to get home. But I guess that's what you're talking about. That's the brunt that you feel as the person in charge, because everyone's looking to you for that decision. And
then like I said, we've got a very simplistic role in a way. Okay, the actual job isn't, but in terms of the aim, we need to get from A to B safely on time. That's it, wrapped up in a bow. That's my logbook filled in today, and then I walk away and off I go. In the ground roles, then people do change and they do move companies, and they might not even stay in the industry. They might do something else for a little while, and they come and go, and they don't really understand what it's like on the operation, but they've come in for a little while and they'll make their opinions, and they'll make assumptions, and they'll have their biases about things, and then I'll be there kind of going, no, that's not what it's like. I really feel the need to stick up for what the pilots and the cabin crew get faced with sometimes.
Does that put you at, not necessarily a risk, but at a disadvantage? Because that makes you very unpopular, being able to be the advocate for them, and that's your role. So how do you, deal with that? Because that sometimes pressures people's faces. Like, I know I should speak up. I know I have the experience that other people don't, but at the same time, I'm going to be the outlier here. Do I really want to do that?
Yeah, exactly. But I don't think about it. I just say. No, exactly. It does create some challenges, because it can be quite threatening if you with the maternity sort of, being the only female, it's very difficult to connect with what that's like. and the reality of it. You know, just the fact that sometimes I actually have to fight for the fact that somebody needs to accept that I am actually the captain. So whenever I go to Venice, I don't know why, but they never think, when I check into the hotel, they never actually think I'm the captain. They they think I'm cabin crew, and I get given a different room and stuff. It's really funny. And they're like, oh. And, you know, my first officer goes, she's the captain. And you have those kind of battles, which you just, you know, wouldn't get if I was a man.
It's the battle. The battle's never done.
No.
Keeps on going.
And I think to translate that into what that means for the commercial side of the operation, and how that actually affects day-to-day operations without being threatening and going in and saying, "Oh, I can't believe this happened," is quite difficult. But I have got a story. Like, I landed in Tehran. I was the first officer in Iran, and we got off, came back the next day for our flight home, and it was my sector to fly the aircraft home, and I left the captain, I went downstairs, I was covered, I had a high-vis jacket on, I had my airside pass over the top, and I started walking around, and a Farsi guard came and got his friend, and they escorted me away, and I got arrested in Iran. And I apparently was a female in a male area. And I was pre-children, I was about 26, 27, that kind of age. And I went into puppy power mode. Yeah, for goodness sakes, what's going on here? Just let me back to the plane. I need to do my walk around. I need to check that the plane's okay before I go. And luckily had the sense to just sit quite quietly. I was left in this room, and you know, it could have been 10 minutes, could have been half an hour. I don't know. And then it's the old company I used to work for. One of the local ground colleagues just I remember this door flying open. He went, "Don't say anything. Come with me. Just don't say anything. Do not say a word." And he's like, "Do not say a word." Okay. So got back to the plane. I was put back in the flight deck, and then the captain was really shaken up, like really stressed. So what happened? What did you do? I was like, nothing. I was just doing a walk around. I went, "Oh, just stay there, and I'll do the walk round. Get yourself ready. You still fly it, but I'll go do the walk round." And he'd really pooed his pants. I just flew home, landed, went straight into the office. I was like, "Guess what happened?" And this is what just happened. No, and I was sort of, and the man, the really lovely guy, another guy called John, actually, just went, "Oh, so it's all bravado out there."
It might be, but you know, that's terrifying as well. Just to get scooped up and put in a room, like, don't know what's going on in a foreign country, like, yeah.
And then they put procedure in that you had to have a male escort to go, or you had to have an escort to go and do that for going forwards. And so they did check it, and there was like a little thing, and yeah, it's unreal, isn't it? But it didn't bother me. And then I remember kids about 2 and 0, 3 and 1, that kind of age. I remember waking up in the middle of the night, just, you know, that could have all been so different. You know, with a mother's perspective later on, and I have a few of those now.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds frightening, to be honest. You just do your job and then just to be taken away like that. Even the, like I said, the explanation, there was no explanation, just come in, say a word, just walk.
Yeah.
I can only imagine what that experience was like.
Yeah. Yeah. A bit different.
As we wrap up, it's been a great interview, great conversation. We've got 2 questions. First one, how do you define leadership?
God, that stumped me. I think you're the identity, and a leader to me means a leader. So that you're the person that people look to. You're the kind of pacemaker, the tone setter. You're the support, and you take the fall. You take the responsibility, and so there's a respect, for that person that's taking the lead. They are the nominated person who is there for the team to get the job done. Not very succinct, but that's how I think about it.
To be fair, it never is. Like I said, it's one word, but everyone has different ways of looking at it, and there's no short, sharp way of putting it sometimes. So that for me sounds good. And I guess last one is, you flew your dad.
I did fly my dad. Yeah.
How was that?
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah, fantastic. It was, yeah. And he must have felt so emotional, and I never really thought about it. It was quite exciting. It's kind of kid-like. Like, oh, got my dad on board. Kind of like that. What was really interesting is when we had our picture taken. So I was a captain. I mean, I've flown him as my when I was a first officer, but I was a captain. But when we had the pictures done, I put him in the captain seat, and I went to the first officer's seat for our picture. It should have been the other way around. They called me Captain Brodie Jr.
I can't imagine. That's like a dream moment, though, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I might be able to trump this because in October, my daughter's going on a school trip to Italy, and they're flying on BA. How cool is that? To said my company. But I'm going to... I'm going to... I might be able to fly her.
Your daughter's flying in an airline that you might be able to fly with. Yes.
Yeah.
Don't worry, we'll edit that part out. We'll do it that way.
I knew I'd never do it. I knew it.
That'd be fun. If that happens, that'd be.
Yeah.
Oh, her friends would love that.
Yeah.
That would be so surreal for her.
I asked her yesterday, I was like, if Mummy could be your pilot, how do you feel about it? And she's like, that's good, I want you to do it. So I'll try and make that happen now. If I can.
That'd be good.
That'd
be really good. But Sarah, it's been an absolute pleasure just learning about your journey and seeing how not only are you elevating to the heights that you've gone to, because I said right at the start that there's 5% of female pilots, let alone, I think the percentage around captains, I think it's like 50 or 75, if that.
It's quite low. I haven't got the stats to hand. I think things have improved. It's definitely a lower percentage for captains.
Yeah.
I think.
I looked at it and I think what I saw was like it's 5 or 6% of the actual population of women who are in that space. So you're in a space worldwide. Yeah. So you're in a space where you're pushing boundaries, and even now that not only you're doing it in the sky, but you're doing it on the ground as well, to be able to be in Africa and be that conduit to be able to help bridge the gap between two worlds, which, like we said, is not always easy or comfortable, but is necessary and is value aligned to who you are. And it's just great to just hear your story, your journey, and the change that you want to see happen, not just in your world, but in your field generally as well, and how you're pushing to do that. So, and that for me is exactly what you describe around leadership. Like, it's someone who's willing to put themselves on the front line and risk it all for the benefit of other people. And it's exactly what you're doing. So thank you very much for sharing your story today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Sophie. It's great to meet you.
Pleasure all mine. This is Everyday Leadership. We will see you all next week.